Okay. This is the College Prep English class for homeschoolers at Excellence in Education. And we are off and going. Let me share the screen. Okay. We have a number of things assigned this week. Dawson, did you watch all of the history of the discoveries about the atom?
No, I didn't get a chance to.
Did you get a chance to watch any of them?
Unfortunately, no. I was going to, but got busy.
Okay, well, we'll leave that in there for next time because I really think it's worthwhile. And as long, I was listening to a version, but I don't think the one that I posted for you, and the sound was sort of bad there. It was kicking in and out. And so as long as the one that you were looking at was okay, that's the important thing. Let's go over to our agenda here. Okay, you know what this is all about. And let's just start out with a review of assignments. I mentioned the book report last time, and I didn't really go through it. It's really very simple. It's just that if you feel like doing a book report, this makes it easy. If you sit down and say, well, what do I do with a book report? Well, this gives you do A, do B, do C, and then you come up with a book report when you're done. And a book report is not just a summary of the plot of the book. You want to put in a number of other things and just enough of the plot of the book to make everything else make sense. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on that? So anybody thinking of a book that might be deserving of a review?
I've heard of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
It's a number of books, and it's absolutely one of the most brilliant things in the world. You remember that, of course, Dawson. We have done that in class before. I'm happy to do it again. Are you familiar with it? Is it something?
I've kind of heard of the book, but I didn't know it was a series or anything.
Well, let's put it this way. It wasn't a book to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
It was a radio play. And the radio play really was quite a spectacular thing in that it was just so beautifully written. When the book came out, Adams was describing, Adams is the author, now dead, unfortunately, trying to go to the book signing in London and found that the streets were absolutely jammed. It was a horrible traffic jam. Eventually discovered it was because of the book signing for his book. The streets were jammed. It's definitely worth looking at. Does anybody have any objections to jumping into that in one form or another?
When you say a book that's worthy of a book report, are you implying that you want us to do a book report on that book? Or?
No, but I'm. Thank you for intending at least to read meaning into my suggestions. No, if you're looking for something to write about, and I'm hoping that you are, a book report is certainly one thing that will qualify, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And book reports are easy. I mean, you're reading books all the time. We've been talking about possibly reading Douglas Adams. Does that inspire you? Are you familiar with him?
A little bit. I've heard him before.
Okay, there are very few people who.
I haven't heard of him.
You haven't. Interesting. There are very few people who wield the language comedically as well as he does. He's an absolutely amazing comic writer. And there are a number of different books he's written. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is the first of a series of books on that subject. He's also written another one called The Last Chance to See, which I think is also very good. That one is nonfiction. And it's about travels he made around the world with a naturalist to visit a number of animals that were threatened with extinction. And that was done a number of years ago, more than 20 years ago, but it's beautifully written also, so that's also a thought. He wrote a couple of other things too, but The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in its 3 forms is probably the most, his magnum opus. The radio play, I think, is the best. It's the longest. None of them agree with each other. The plots are all different. They sort of go off in different directions with the same characters. First, there was the radio play, then the book, and there was a TV miniseries, and then the movie. And so we can look at any of those in any order. I'd like to start with the radio play, perhaps. Okay. When we get down to our literature section, we will take a look at that. I threw this one in, the Lecture on Language by Steve Try, just because it's a brand new one that I hadn't seen before online of his. And he behaves himself fairly well in there. Not all that well, but I don't think there's anything terribly untoward about it. Who did manage to see this one?
I saw about a quarter of it.
Okay. He's the same character, of course, who did the kinetic typography video that we saw last week. And his enthusiasm for language itself is really, it's inspiring. And his use of language is indeed remarkable. So very, very nice to listen to somebody who works like that. I found a number of others that I think you might enjoy more. Do you remember any works by Terry Eagleton that I may have assigned in the past? Not really.
Yeah, not really.
Okay. He hasn't done as much. One of the wonderful ways to study spoken language is to follow great writers when they're on book tours, because a writer who has come up with a book and is publicizing that book is going to be doing book tours, and those book tours are going to be put out there on the internet for everybody to see, and they're not under copyright or anything because they were promotional. And so some writers have resulted in this massive, wonderful body of work out there that we can follow and study. Fry does a certain amount of it, and unfortunately, Eagleton doesn't do nearly enough of it. He's written over 50 books, and there are a few scattered little book tour things. Okay. Here's the kinetic typography one. You have all watched this now, right? And some of you went through, I just threw this list of words together. Now, the problem is that for our vocabulary listings, it's not a lot of that. It doesn't have a lot of value just to list the words themselves without reminding yourself somehow what they mean. And so in each of these cases, the best way to do that is we grab the word itself. I wonder if I'm, there we go. And I can do a dictionary search here using the feature. Have you all had an opportunity to put that little right-click dictionary into your browser?
Yep.
Good, because what you do is just go out into the dictionary, grab the definition, and cut and paste it into your vocabulary journal. Whenever you find yourself doing something mindless and repetitive and, dare I say it, pointless, think about some way that you can get around doing that, because human beings are good for more than that sort of thing. Granted, there are some skills, the acquisition of which require a certain amount of repetition. And so I can understand that sometimes in order to really learn something well, you may have to do something over and over again. But generally, if you're doing something that just requires mindless repetition, You shouldn't be doing that. You should be getting a computer to do it. You should be looking out on the internet to see if somebody else is doing it and go and steal it from there, because really your minds are worth more than that. Do something creative with it. However, in order to put these lists together, one has to do a certain amount of moving the definitions in. I would like to take us into vocabulary journals. This is a nice one here. This is a very simple entry, but it's got 6 words here. Most of them from that list, but not all. Anglophone, an English-speaking person. Pedant, a person who is excessively concerned with minor details and rules, or with displaying academic learning. And indeed, that's what the kinetic typography video was all about, the pedantry, as opposed to the artistry. If that, do you understand what I mean by that? And of course, Fry is encouraging the artistry and discouraging the pedantry as being something that's unimportant. I don't think pedantry is unimportant, or at least I don't think getting things right is unimportant for our purposes. Because whenever you open your mouth, whenever you put pen to paper, someone is judging you on how you wield the language. And you want to wield the language so that you're judged the way you'd like them to judge you. And when it comes to college preparatory material, well, it has to be formal. We want to get our, we want to get our uninterested and disinterested correct, and our infer and imply correct. We may even want to get none correct, even though Fry got that one wrong, and what he was talking about isn't necessarily correct. You see what I mean? If you make a mistake, there's somebody somewhere is going to take exception to your mistake and object to it. And in some cases, there are mistakes that a lot of people think are mistakes that aren't really. Well, we just have to please them sometimes. Even if you know better, if you're not going to get an opportunity to explain that to them, let's make sure that nobody has something to object to in what you've been doing. Okay, so this is fine. Heterodox. What is orthodox, by the way?
Means, I guess, traditional.
That's very good. Yeah, traditional, traditionally acceptable. Orthodox, really correct opinion, literally. Heterodox means sort of disparate opinions, different opinions of different sorts. By the way, how do you defining it here? Not conforming with accepted orthodox, there's the word, orthodox standards or beliefs. So in other words, diverging from the canonical recommended norms. Sinister, the impression that something is harmful or evil is happening or will happen. Very good, very good. Giving the impression. Sinister, of course, means left-handed, doesn't it? It does. We've got the right-handed and the left-handed. And transphobia. I hadn't come across that one before. In this case, intense dislike of or prejudice against transsexual or transgender people. I had seen that one before. Let's take a look at vocabulary journals just in general to get a concept of what I'm going to go into mine here. Now mine, unfortunately, because I moved it from elsewhere, tends to all be in one big place. No, I guess it isn't. This is Connor, this isn't mine. Okay. Okay, I put his up, so that's what's going on there. Okay, So really what you want to do is, I would usually put these up in blocks of 10 to a dozen, depending on how often I felt like sticking them up there. But very simply, the word itself, and then enough of a definition to let you know all you need to know about the word and how it's used. And from time to time, you want to go back over these and just refresh your memory on them. Worthwhile thing. And vocabulary is also something I wanted to look at a little bit today. Let's go back into our classroom. Okay. Now, I suppose we're going to leave this gentleman up here for next time, Jim Al-Khalili, and his three-part presentation on the atom, which I put up there because there was interest in modern science and technology. And this is perhaps the most crucial science and the most amazing series of developments that have taken place within the last 100 years, or just a little over 100 years, going from a state in which nobody believed that atoms existed. That's what happened to Boltzmann. They wouldn't even accept them, to understanding really what's going on inside them. Not just that they exist, but what their internal structure is, and how many electrons an atom can have, and what makes an atom of one particular element different from an atom of another element. What makes hydrogen different from helium, different from carbon, different from oxygen, and so forth. And the big one, iron, which was interesting to me. I hadn't come across that before, that iron is indeed the most stable of the atoms. Anyway, there's a great deal to be learned there. Okay, argument. I threw up this little one here, Hitchens on freedom of speech. I think that's been up a couple of weeks now. And I think his war on drugs, I may have just added last week. Any thoughts on these?
I think his opinion was interesting, and personally, I think it was a little too extreme.
For which one?
The war on drugs one.
The war on drugs one?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a popular one.
No, I think the way he describes it, we devote way too much money and time into a war on drugs.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Of course, I think in a way he makes a good point when he says the efforts and money that we are sinking into it now is not reaping any benefit.
Yeah, it's also pointless as well.
So it's interesting that he would take that perspective on it, but indeed.
For his freedom of speech, he hit the nail on the head. He was talking about how when you have an opinion and someone with a different opinion, they disagree with you, they're not open to hear your opinion, even if it's right or wrong. And so they shut you out and they tag you with some disorder that you may have, and they judge you by that one opinion and the biased media.
Very nicely put. Very nicely put. And that really was one of his main points, is that his opinion on things has been drawn from a few of the things he may have said and may not have said, and has been presented by people who haven't even read his works. And indeed, he writes brilliantly. He writes beautifully. Not quite as good, not quite as well as his brother, I don't think, but still. Okay, the chaos. I did give you that to you last week, and I asked, does anybody like to look at it, see if you can get through the thing correctly? Credit will be given for reading it through correctly. Does anybody want to give us some of it a try?
I haven't looked at it yet, so could you maybe click on it?
Okay, let's see. I want to take us into that one too. Here we are. The chaos. Now, this is really intended, this is more fun for us. We are native speakers of the language. There are a few words in here that we're likely to have difficulty with. But for anyone trying to learn English, especially English spelling and pronunciation, this is a minefield of difficulty. And you see why. Things like dearest creature in creation. Notice that creature and creation are spelled almost the same way, but they're pronounced very differently. Creature, creation. Studying English pronunciation. I will teach you in my verse sounds like.
Can I give it a try?
Please go ahead.
Are you to read the parentheses?
What parentheses?
The
We'll read everything, including what's in the parentheses.
dearest creature in creation, studying English pronunciation. I will teach you in my verse sounds like a corpse, horse, and worse.
Excellent.
I will keep you, Susie, busy, make your head with heat grow dizzy. Tear and I your hair will tear, so shall I. Oh, hear my prayer. Pray. Console your loving poet, make my coat look new. Dear, sew it.
Sew it.
Sew it.
Go ahead.
Just compare hearts, beard and herd, dies and diet, Lord and word, sword and sword,
Sword, yes.
retain and Britain.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's tricky. Mind the latter, how it's written. Maid has not the sound of babe.
Made has not the sound of bad.
Bad.
That's a hard one.
See said, paid, laid, but played.
Plaid.
Plaid.
Yes.
Now I surely will not plague you with such words as vague as ah.
Vague and ague.
But be careful how you speak. Say break, steak, but Blake and
It is streak.
streak.
Bleak
Okay.
and streak, yes.
Previous, precious,
That's the flower. Fuchsia.
fuchsia. I can't see what's downward to the right of it.
A previous precious fuchsia via.
Via. Pipe, snipe, recite, and
That's recipe.
and
Choir.
choir.
Yes.
Cloven, oven, how and low. Script, receipt, shoe, poem, toe. Hear my say, divulge a trickery. Daughter, laughter,
And terpsichore.
interpsichore.
We'll have to go at the list of the muses sometime. Calliope, terpsichore,
Yes.
Melpomene, and so forth. Typhoid, measles, tonsils, aisles, exiles, similes, reviles. Okay, you understand why this is almost impossible for somebody who doesn't really have this English down. And some of them are really obscure.
I'll try, and I think I may get it next week.
Okay,
If it's still
very
up
good.
then.
No, by all means. And you can cheat. You can cheat by listening to the recording.
Oh,
But I'll tell you ahead of time, there is one mistake in there that I'm aware of.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Anyway, a lot of fun. You can pull this on somebody, make a copy of it so that you can. You might actually win a lot of money out of it if you bet somebody you can't read it. Okay. I wanted to take you into this. This is I've added it to the classroom. There's a link there. You can just go into it directly yourself.
Very nice. I know.
You're familiar with this one? Okay, good. It's just it's an intelligent vocabulary quiz program. And by intelligent, I mean that as you progress, it will give you things that are harder and harder. You make a mistake and it drops you down a level. And so you seek your own appropriate level in there. And it's just a lot of fun to go in and do it. And after a while, you'll find that it has an immense list in there. But after a while, you'll find that they start becoming familiar or something. And we'll have to go on and find another quiz program somewhere else. If you come across another one, by all means. But this one is graded. Originally, it was 0 to 50. And they extended it and went 0 to 60. However, that really doesn't help anyone very much. The immensely obscure words that they put in from the 50 to 60 are not words you can use anywhere. And so that, I think, is also to a large extent the case with the ones that fall into the 40 to 50 range. I suggest, and the link I put in will take you in at level 30.
Okay.
Now, if you want to go lower than that, if that's too high, then you can start it down lower by simply going in. And well, I think we have to do one first, and then you can go in and change the change the level here.
And for each question you get right,
That's right. That's right. You're actually contributing your.
Once I did it for math and for a couple hours, and at the end of the day, I gave, I think, 10,000 grains.
Very good.
I'm not sure where they get these grains from, but
Where the what?
where they get the grains from.
Oh, well, what's happening here is the ads here are paying for the contributions you're making. So every time you get a word, you get another ad coming through.
Okay, I see.
Okay, so this doesn't look to me. No, it started us at level 1 again. So let's change our level. We will.
I think we should push it and try level.
Where would you like to be?
5.
Level 5?
Level
35.
35. Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't we start at 30, and if we just we'll get up to 35. Let's do a little bit of this quickly, just to get a feel for it. Discrepant.
Oh,
Be inconsistent.
Excellent. Discrepancy, of course, is the word that's probably more familiar. Okay, independence. That looks as though it's popped us down to 1 again or something.
oh yes.
It has.
Oh,
Oh, let's see if we can figure out a way to stay up at level 30. Okay, go. Okay, that's a level 30 word.
Can we put some of these in our vocabulary?
Absolutely,
journals?
that's what it's for.
Okay.
Yeah, and when you grab them, just grab the word itself, and up here, when you get one right, you can just grab it like this, cut and paste it out. Okay. Okay, ossify. An ossuary is a place where bones are kept. Just a hint.
So harden into bone.
Very good. Zenith.
Oh, I know what that is. Summit.
Excellent. Apex. Yeah. Abate.
Subside.
Intend.
I think subside is what they're looking at here. Yeah. Culvert.
Idre.
Excellent.
Oh,
Excellent. Luminary. That's a very bad definition.
I'm guessing B. B.
oh,
Magnanimous.
Generous.
Excellent. Excellent. What else is just pretty through on here? Encumbrance. I'll give you a hint that won't do you any good. Oh, what is a fardel? Just thought I'd throw that out there. And one of the reasons that that one is a worthwhile word to know is it's actually in Hamlet's soliloquy. And we'll look at that maybe at some point. But it is a synonym for burden. To be encumbered by something is to be laden with something or responsible for something. Okay, so a parable, you all know that. No?
I'm guessing B.
This one?
Yes.
Are you? Why don't you just say the words? We don't actually have A, B, C, and D up there. Okay.
Allegory.
Allegory. Excellent. Enmity.
I know the word parable because it's in the Bible, parable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Enmity. Think about
Hatred.
inimical. That won't help at all.
Hatred.
Excellent. Yeah. Inimical is the state of being an enemy. One is inimical. Malleable, you know that one.
The pliant.
Yep. Braggadocio. It's very difficult to miss that one. I'll give you a hint that won't help.
Interesting.
Rhodomontade. I think I may even have used that.
Yeah.
Okay.
He said it.
Boasting.
Ghosting. Disaffected. When you try to take words like this and make a single word definition out of them, it often misses the mark. It doesn't really mean rebellious. Garrulity, wonderful word. I hate to say this one again because I think Dawson probably heard it already, but I have a story about garrulity. My daughter sitting with us at an outdoor restaurant, and she was holding forth as she often did. She was about 3 years old, and somebody came by, a random person, and simply said, "She talks awfully well, doesn't she?" And then Fiona responded, "That's because I'm garrulous." Anyway, okay, so you know what that means. Impreferred.
Be lacking.
Very good. Yeah, I don't remember seeing that one before, but that's certainly got to be the answer. Pretty cool.
Being.
Yeah, this is one of the things that
Spanish.
does irritate me somewhat about this listing is it does have a lot of words in it that may seem obscure, but they're not actually obscure. They're just from a different dialect. It's
Yeah.
got Scottish words and things like that that are commonly used, just not that commonly in American. Adjutant.
Shin bone. That's my.
I would say assistant.
You're probably right.
It's actually a specific a specific rank in the British military system, adjutant. Acme. We're back to our zenith. Right?
Highest point.
Very good. Discourse. We're up to 36 now, by the way.
Speech.
Excellent. Matins, from the French.
Foundation.
Morning prayer.
Very good, very good. Do you, I'm sure you've all heard that old song, Frère Jacques, dormez-vous?
Oh, I
Yeah.
think so, yeah.
Sonne le matine. Sonne le matine. Listen to the morning bells. Right?
Oh.
It's the matins. It's the church day. Akimbo.
You're right. It would be difficult trying to fit one of these words into a sentence when talking with another person.
Yeah, we're going to encounter that a little bit later on. It's so often the case that you can find something which actually is a synonym, but the synonym can't be used the same way as the original is. Okay, I haven't the foggiest notion. What is this?
Hands on hips, I don't know.
What?
I would be
I
almost
thought
certain
I
that's
heard
what it
this.
is.
I thought I heard that word yesterday.
No,
somewhere.
it sounds like an African dialect of some sort.
Probably is.
Hussar.
Cavalryman.
Excellent. Aileron. It's not actually a flap. A flap is a different navigational surface, but that's close enough. Cordovan. I don't know. Anybody?
Maybe soft leather.
It could well be soft leather. It certainly sounds like it. It could be a chase, as in. No, let's try soft leather. Oh, you're absolutely right. Moratorium. We all know that one. Generally, we're talking. You wouldn't have a moratorium on a lot of different things. There's just certain things you would have a moratorium on. For example, on hostilities. And so to suspend hostilities would make this sense. But you can suspend a lot more things than you can have a moratorium on, if that makes sense. Boreal.
Northern.
Excellent. And where did you get that one from?
It's because boreal forests. They're usually up in I guess some of the northernmost forests
Mhm.
in the world. So
Excellent. Or the Aurora Borealis.
That's what I
That's
was
much in the
thinking.
same group. Al fresco. Okay, I'm sorry, we're wasting that time here, but I just wanted to show it to you because this can be a lot of fun if we have a little extra time at some point. We can just go through these. But what I'm suggesting though is go up to 40 and stop, because once you start talking about.
What if we can't get to 40?
Oh, well, in that case, the level that you end up at is probably the one where you belong.
Okay.
Okay, but probably 30 is a good place to start. If you want to, by all means, start at 20. You probably get up to 30 fairly easily. All right. Let's jump in here. As our eyes not. Okay, he may well be listening or be intending to listen remotely, so let's just go ahead and look at it. He's written a nice little paper here on vaccines and specifically taking the argument that the cons of the vaccine outweigh the pros but specifically
Yes.
recommending that it not be mandatory.
Yeah. I remember that actually is a debate that's going on in the hospitals and mothers because people they keep vaccinating their kids and their kids keep getting sick.
There are certainly arguments. Arguments are presented on both sides, but it's interesting that if you look at things in perspective, very often a new drug comes along, a vaccine that has an immense effect initially and does solve problems, but in the long run, you end up, for some reason or another, causing more problems than you solve. And I've seen this in literary references and so forth all over the place, but of course that's just anecdotal evidence. It's not really something you can work with, but it does seem to be the case. My suggestions here to him, he did some very nice work here. I'm sure you've all read it, right? Good work, good research and presentation, both sides of the issue, one project. Of course, if you wanted to make this into a research paper, you could do that easily enough, but you would want then to follow the standard format for your sources, referencing your sources, and make sure that you give credit for each one of the points that you put up there, which is easily enough done. And again, it's one of those areas where I wouldn't want you to waste your time trying to figure out how to do it. Use the citation engine, into which you can throw in the ISBN number of a book, and it will make the citation for you and plug it in. There, I have one linked there in the classroom.
Is this on the project forum?
No, it's in the main classroom, I believe, and it may be only in the old classroom. I'll bring it over if it isn't. They come and go too. The one that I had linked in there disappeared, and I had to find another one. Okay, points to watch for: clarity and accuracy. Your thoughts are clear, but your words don't always reflect that. I got a feeling he knew exactly what he was talking about, but the words don't actually unambiguously present it that way. Let's take a look at that. If you open a quote, close it. Mass nouns and count nouns. This is why I was suggesting that we perhaps should jump into Chapter 6, which addresses the issue of mass noun and count nouns. Can someone tell me what a mass noun and count noun are? If not, let's go in and look at how that works. And always read your work through aloud. It's easy. I find myself saying that on everybody's paper, but the reason I say it is that I feel that once you get the right language in your ear should be able to tell you whether it's right when you're reading it, but it doesn't if it doesn't hear it. Now, at least that's the way it works for me. Some people may work entirely differently, but I find that I can go through a paper a dozen times, but if I don't read it aloud, first time I read it aloud, I'll find stuff I've missed all the way along. Okay, in light of the recent measles outbreak, there has been much debate about the subject of vaccines. I felt that in the wake of, that is, after it, and possibly resulting from it, but in the light of is usually taking something into account, and I just felt that worked a little better than the phrase he used. In many cases, it's very hard to tell exactly what is the best way to go. When you have a number of items listed, I'm sure you've been taught this, it's 1, 2, and 3 is usually the way it's done nowadays. Some people do 1, 2, and 3, and that is the way it used to be, and in certain publications, that's the way it still is.
Yeah, that's the way I do it.
But that's not the way it is recommended in most in most forms and in most sets of guidelines. Now, if you're submitting something for to a publication, you want to read their guidelines and get it right. Most of them will not want that one. It's called the Oxford comma, because Oxford University Press used to use it, but then has discontinued its use of it. Okay, now this is this is unfortunately an example of listening to it won't help. Okay, so outweigh, we've got to spell it correctly in order to get the right meaning there, and it sounds just the way that he spelled it, but it's wrong that way. Okay, a lack of clarity here. The question here was, by the time the child is 6-year age, that child would have had 49 doses and 14 vaccines. This is a serious problem for some parents. What makes it a problem for them? Do they object to it on theoretical grounds, on scientific grounds, because it's too expensive, because it's too irksome? You see what I mean? And so I felt that it would make sense to just add that in there to make it a little clearer. Okay, and whenever I put an exclamation point in, that means yes, there's something good about that. And this was nicely put together here. Okay, now listen to the original. Only 1 per several hundred thousand to 1 per million adverse reaction actually occur. That doesn't read well at all.
There
It's
has
got
to be a mistake.
yeah, oh yeah, there are a number of
Another
mistakes.
per-
Well, it's wide range that he's contending, but I felt that we really have to make that clearer. So my suggested solution here is only 1 in several hundred thousand cases results in an adverse reaction. Very simple and straightforward. The original one fumbled around a little bit. My suggestion there, however, didn't include as broad a range as the original one did, which was several hundred thousand to 1 million. We could have added that in. Okay, here is the count noun and mass noun. Millions of people would be infected with an outrageous amount of diseases. When you're working with a plural noun, diseases here, you can't use a mass, you can't use an amount, because an amount is for a mass. You can say how much, then you say it's an amount. How much water, it's the amount of water. But when we're talking about something that's in plural, then we have to use a count noun. So the number of diseases. You could say the amount of disease, and that's perfectly acceptable, because disease could be regarded as a mass noun. We could say how much disease, you see, and then that works fine. But if we're going to use the plural, we can't use the word amount. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just read that part in that chapter. I don't think anybody will have any other problems with it. Okay, and here we've got people who are supporters of these forced vaccinations implore that it's necessary. Now, implore is a good word. It's a wonderful word. We've got a number of nice words for that in the English language. To supplicate, to okay, but none of them really work this way. I think plead does, however, because you can plead something. You can't necessarily importune something or supplicate something or implore something. It doesn't take an object the same way that to plead does. Anyway, any questions on this one? Okay.
Now,
yeah.
if we have a project to submit, do we submit it in the project form?
Yeah, simply post it into the writer's forum, please don't put it in as an attachment. I believe this one was put in as an attachment as well, and attachments just don't work.
Just put it on.
Just cut
Insert
and
it
paste the
into-
whole thing in. Yeah. And if it comes in with all kinds of horrible stuff, as this one did, oh no, I guess it didn't. No, that was a different one. Okay. If it comes in with all kinds of HTML garbage at the top of it, go ahead and just paste it in, and then you can go in and edit it and take that out afterwards. Okay, and Dawson has written a very nice little thing. Let's go ahead and take a look at it here. And I've got all kinds of questions about this. I think we could actually run a little further with this if anybody's interested, because I find it interesting. Myths and comparisons of historical European martial arts. Okay, avoid flavorless generic turns of phrase, having a revival, when there are common collocations that express the thought better. Experiencing a revival, or undergoing a revival. Do you see what I mean by that?
Yeah.
Yeah, because having, I mean, there's nothing more generic or less flavorful or clear than that. Avoid repetition. This is always a problem in the English language. Once you've used a word, especially a good word, you can't do it again. You got to find another one. That may be one of the reasons there are so many different choices in the English language. And here's one example here. The organization was started only a few decades ago and is now starting to become more popular. Now you see how start is used twice in that sentence. So, well, we've got another word for it. Let's change one of them to begin instead of start.
Okay.
Okay, and then let's see, trying to learn martial techniques during the Dark Ages, almost impossible, and much more along the lines of experimental archaeology. I found that awkward. I thought it fit more easily together if I say trying to learn martial techniques during the Dark Ages and antiquity. The verb is missing in there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Is almost impossible from written records, and one must rely much more upon experimental archaeology. Because the written records, for some reason, I mean, describe what the written records are from those periods.
Well, they're mostly practically non-existent.
Well, you do have stories that date
yes.
back then, and you've got stories of knights and so forth, but they never get into any detail on what they're actually doing.
Yeah.
It's very strange. It's just it's very much like the pictures at the time are very very limited and follow very strict guidelines on how they're put together. And they really don't convey nearly as much information as one finds with things that happen later on. So experimental archaeology, what do we mean by that?
Basically trying to interpret by, I guess, like the weapons of the time and so forth, and what tactics, I guess, would have been most appropriate for, I guess, using those weapons, so to speak. Yeah.
Because it's really hard to tell what the tactics would have been back then. I'm at a loss. It's not described, and you have these double-bladed weapons. The long sword, which, as you explained, is a two-handed sword, and the broadsword, which is a one-handed sword. Yeah, interesting. But exactly what the tactics would be. Let's go on a little bit here and see what we come across. Little things I've suggested here. These mainly focus on the use of long swords, though they also train to a certain extent in the use of spears, half staves, staffs. Notice that the plural staves exists and was used back then. If you've got an irregular plural, let's use it. And sword and buckle. Now, I looked that up. I thought maybe there was a sense of the word buckle that would make sense, but of course you meant buckler, right?
Yeah.
Which is a small round shield. Okay. Here we've got all kinds of wonderful rapiers, sickles, messers. What is a messer?
It's basically a giant German Bowie knife, basically. Yeah, it's yeah, and it has a
Messer means knife in German.
I'm sorry?
Messer means knife in German.
Absolutely. It simply means knife.
yeah, yeah, it's about this long.
That's
the-
interesting. So more like a
blade.
dirk.
It's kind of about the same size as a one-handed sword, like a side sword. Yeah, it's just that it's much more. Well, I mean, it looks much more like a Bowie knife, and it has a extra. What's
Is
the
it
word?
double bladed?
It's kind of. Okay, well, I mean, one side of it is sharp, and then part of the other side is blunt, except for the small tip, which is also sharp. So
Should we look up a photo right now? of
We
it?
should be able to do that. I don't have one in here.
Well,
Let's
I
see.
mean, just Google it, then click images.
Absolutely. We could do that. I've got Google Google Translation here. I don't actually have a Google one up, but normally I have a Google image search on my one at home, and then I can just pop it right up. I don't know if we need to jump into that, but it's fascinating that just the word messer had that specific meaning. How many other names can you think of for knives in different areas of literature? What is a bodkin?
for that, I should know this.
Where have you come across that one? As quietus make with a bare bodkin. That's also from Hamlet. How about a poignard?
Oh yeah, that's a dagger.
Very good. And of course, a dirk would be Scottish.
It'd be a Scottish dagger.
Kukri.
Kukri. Very good. Nepalese. Okay, here I thought this was a little awkward. Let's see, where did it start? There are also several surviving texts from Spain, France, and England during this time period, but there isn't enough material to create their own separate schools for this time period. I thought it was just perfectly clear to say there isn't enough material to create separate schools.
All right.
You see what I mean? Now, one thing that that irked me a lot was time period and time period. You keep on repeating that in a number of places, and you'll want to find some alternative way to describe that if you really need to say it again. One of the easiest ways out of that kind of problem is just allow it to be said once and then refer to the original instance.
Mhm.
Next one here. These schools are often separated in Spanish, French, English, Scottish schools of arms, and are for some reason not as common or popular as the earlier German and Italian schools. And I thought that this really didn't tell me what I wanted to know. When and with whom were they less popular? You see what I mean? With
Right.
modern researchers? You see what I mean?
Right.
Broadswords, rapiers, and cutlasses. Great sword. And who was William Wallace?
He was a famous Scottish leader back during the First War of Scottish Independence.
Very good. Okay. Now, you will go through this, I'm sure, point by point and understand what the points I've made here. If you have objection to any of them, please let me know if you have any questions about them. But let's just look at one more here. One last myth I feel I should mention is the katana. Although this was not a sword people during this place and time would have encountered, not a sword encountered during this place and time, or say in this place and time would work a little better there. I think that works a little better. Is probably the most ridiculously outrageous myths of any sword. And indeed, we don't want the other in there because of any sword. We're comparing it to all the swords, including itself, presumably.
Right.
So what is, tell me about the katana.
Okay. Yeah, obviously that one isn't of European origin, but I pretty much always hear about it, and even in like history documentaries, and people calling it the best sword ever made and that kind of stuff. Yeah, and I mean the katana is a good sword. But it's just as good as any other. It's just that this myth has kind of been perpetuated, I guess, and a lot of people believe in it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of bias towards the katana. And also as I mentioned later on, it kind of ties in with the fact that a lot of Westerners, lost their martial arts and their sword making skills and so forth, due to advancements into technology and so forth. So yeah.
Okay, now one of the contentions, of course, with the manufacturing of the katana was that they would often take this strip of metal and fold it over and forge it over and over and over again, which of course was also done with the European swords, I gather. But of course, the Japanese tend to be a little bit more obsessive compulsive about that, I think.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it strong, because it gets the impurities out of the metal when it's forged over and over like that. Do you feel that the European swords were equivalent or at all comparable to the katana in their manufacture?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think so for that time period, at least back during like the late Middle Ages, and the Renaissance. But I don't really know exactly a whole lot about the European sword making, I guess, skills and so forth. But I do know that they did use a lot more metals and material and so forth in the making of, for example, longswords and so forth.
It had a lot more metal in the manufacture of a longsword than a katana. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Like there's a lot more, I guess, actual metal put into this word. I mean, there's a lot more metal in it. And it's also a lot longer, which is part of the reason why there's a lot more metal in the making process. Yeah.
And of course, the katana is just one-sided, one blade, whereas you've got this. That's one of the things that I find mysterious about the use of the longsword was, when did you ever use the back of the blade? When did you ever swing it the other way? If this makes any sense.
Yeah.
Also, in the use of katanas, it's the standard practice to block the opponent's sword with the side of your blade rather than with the blade, so that you don't dull it. Mm-hmm. Is that also the case with European swords?
Preferably, but I mean, of course, in a combat situation, if you don't, then that's all right. It's about basically surviving, and trying to live, basically. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very good, very good. Nicely put together and nicely researched. Anybody have any questions on this subject?
Would, say, a paper like that require a bibliography or?
It depends on whether you're going to do it as a research paper. This is not a research paper, this is an essay. And essay is just fine for our purposes at this point. If you would like to do a research paper, by all means, then you want to follow one of the standard formats, probably by just getting the word template and filling it in. As I said, an awful lot of emphasis and an awful lot of wasted time is spent in learning where everything is supposed to be. Use a word template and get the software to do that for you. There's no reason to spend energy on it. But then you'll want to find your resources and refer to them and cite them appropriately. Now, there are several different formats, the Chicago format and the MLF format. These are not important. We'll let the software worry about those. Okay. What have I got there? Nothing more there. Okay. So, literature. Now, this is one of the big questions, is what we should be reading. And these were the suggestions that came up. And I did, as I mentioned last week, look at David Copperfield a bit, and it comes right back. And I don't have the enthusiasm for it that I would like to imbue the material in here with. And so I don't want to say no. If anybody wants to read David Copperfield and give us chapter by chapter descriptions as they go through, that's fine. But I'm not enthusiastic about revisiting it. Peter Pan, I think, is a delightful book, but it doesn't sound as though there's a lot of enthusiasm for it. It does sound as though we've hit on something which I think has some real value, and that is Adams. Now, some people will look at that and say, well, what an intensely frivolous and strange writer Adams was. But I think it covers multiple areas here very effectively, because you were asking last time about technological and scientific. And Adams knows his science, and he weaves it in very effectively. And he comes up with utter absurdities. At one point, actually, in the documentary that I assigned, they reference Adams. Did anybody get to that point? Am I giving you too much here to listen to?
No.
Okay, good.
I listened to everything else.
Yeah,
I
that's
got
just the one video I didn't
halfway
watch.
through that. That was it.
Okay, well, I want to make sure you have enough. And so there is plenty more to find. I don't want to overwhelm you, but on the other hand, I want to overwhelm you because I want to make sure that you don't find that you've exhausted everything and say, what am I going to do next? In which case you can always ask, give us more homework. Okay. But yes, in that one, he references Douglas Adams when he's talking about the properties of mayonnaise. And apparently something about mayonnaise is actually demonstrates a characteristic of atoms and their behavior, which is significant. And well, Adams would probably have spaceships powered by mayonnaise or something like this, which is fascinating when you think about the ways that Adams does in fact power his spaceships. Now, one of the things you've discovered when you started watching this, I believe it starts actually talking about the Michelson-Morley experiment, doesn't it? In this, I'm wondering if I'm thinking of something else. So correct me if I'm wrong. They talk about the Michelson-Morley experiment, which was an experiment to determine the position and velocity of the ether, where ether is this presumed interstellar medium through which light travels as a wave. Now, do you understand the principle of the purpose behind that experiment? Okay, here's the theory. Now, I'm not sure it's worth mentioning this because it's been entirely debunked, but at one point it was assumed that there must be a medium through which light travels, because light doesn't need air to travel through, nor anything else. But because it's a wave, there must be a medium through which it's traveling, just as a wave travels through water. And so we assume that this medium must exist. It's invisible. We can't taste it. We can't do anything with it. It passes through everything else. But if that medium does exist, how fast is it going and where is it going? That was the question. And the answer was, okay, if light travels through this medium, let's test the speed of light going this way, and then test the speed of light going this way, and test the speed of light going this way, and see whether the medium itself is going in any particular direction. We test light going that direction, then test light going that direction. Now, if that medium is moving at all, light is going to go faster in one of those directions. And the result of this experiment was, maybe it wasn't in that video. It's not going anywhere. The speed of light is always exactly the same, no matter what direction you test it in.
That's what I was thinking.
And so that just baffled everybody. And then Lorentz, this Dutchman, came up with the idea, well, maybe the medium is causing things to contract in the direction that you're moving, so that it's not actually going as far. It's an interesting thought. Who straightened us out on this one? Einstein. Is Einstein's special relativity.
So, but
yeah.
I second guessed.
Well, it's really amazing what he came up with and how he explained it. Really, if you start with the assumption the speed of light is always exactly the same, regardless of who is measuring it and where it's going, then the only way to explain discrepancies is to say that space and time are not constant. Speed of light is clearly an absolute constant, but the only way to explain how I see this light beam traveling at this speed, but someone else who's traveling very rapidly in that direction sees it also traveling at the speed of light, is to say that time itself has changed and space itself has dilated. Now that's an amazing step to take, but it turns out that is the solution to the problem. When things travel fast, they become short. That sounds utterly weird, but that was the only way to solve the problem. This is special relativity, however, and applies only to objects that are traveling at constant velocity. When they're changing direction or changing velocity, then we end up having gravitational force involved, and that became much more complex, and he solved that one 10 years later in his general relativity. Anyway, Adams plays around with this a little bit. Now, our difficulty is that if light travels at a specific speed and nothing can go faster than the speed of light, how can you possibly get to some distant galaxy that's 10,000 light years away?
Time.
Well, that's
Eventually you'll get there.
time. Eventually you get there. In fact, if you go fast enough, time will slow down enough so that one would actually manage to get there, and you might still be alive, but 10,000 years would have elapsed for somebody who was not going at that speed.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. That's just a theory. It hasn't been proven yet.
It has been proven as really as conclusively as Newton's laws of physics, I think, because we really have to take those laws of relativity into account when we have anything moving fast enough that we have to include that. And it turns out that Einstein was absolutely right. I mean, experimentally, it actually works out. The problem is that if you're not going fast enough, you can't tell. So it's only when you've got a particle that's going, for example, there are particles that are created in the upper atmosphere, and they make their way all the way down to the surface of the Earth, even though we know that they only live for a fraction of a second. But you see, that fraction of a second has been expanded for them so that they can actually go that distance, if that makes any sense. So it has been experimentally demonstrated.
Have you seen Interstellar?
I haven't. I've been intending to. Would you recommend it?
Yes. It kind of, it's based around what you said about people or things going into space. I don't want to spoil it for you, but it's
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and watch that. Has anybody else seen it, or?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
it's 3 hours long.
I think that will be a fascinating thing. Let's just look at it and see what discussion it evokes for next time. Okay, so let's switch over and put Douglas Adams up there, and anything else anybody would like to consider as well. Now, Adams, his language is excellent, so that's I have no objection to him on language grounds, although it's not necessarily as artistic as the language of some authors. When it comes to humor, nobody else comes close, I think. It's just really wonderful.
At this point, I think we just need to find something and stick with it until we're finished with it.
It's a nice idea. There are a number of books in the series. I'll see if we can work with the
Not necessarily the
radio
whole
play.
series, but
Yeah.
until you finish the book, that's when we decide.
But you see, one of the problems with traveling interstellar distances is the fact that we can't go fast enough. So in science fiction, they've come up with all kinds of different ways of trying to solve this. And Adams plays with some of these, but what do they use in Star Trek, for example?
The warp speed.
Warp drive. What is warp? Essentially what they're doing there is they're assuming that it's possible to warp space so that you're actually not going that enormous distance because you're bending space around and managing to get through. Okay, well, that's one solution. Adam's first solution is improbability drive. Now, as you discover, if you go through this video that I've assigned you, the history of the atom, that improbability or probability, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle specifically, allows for the possibility that a particle can be anywhere in space. And you don't know where it is until you pin it down and actually look at it, and then it decides where it's going to be. This is a very odd concept, extremely odd concept, but he uses this by saying, okay, we're going to create an improbability field that will allow us to sort of snap our way across the universe by using improbability. Later on, he uses some other fascinating devices and very effectively well, we'll have to bring those up.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah. Okay. And vocabulary, older assignments. I'll try to throw these older assignments down here. Is everybody caught up with the old ones?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Okay. So you need a whole lot more for next time. Well, maybe not all that much, because please all watch that that one series. It's very good. It's not funny enough, but we'll throw in some Adams. I think that will solve it. Any other suggestions of things that you would like to research, you would like to write, you would like to discuss.
Can I write about history or something? History?
You've read about what?
Can I write about history as a project?
Oh, absolutely. What historical period are you thinking of?
Civil War.
Certainly. Okay. No, that's fine if it appeals adequately. Something.
Or just
Go ahead.
anything. And are we to read something, chapter 6?
I was going to suggest chapter 6. Why don't you just look at chapter 6 and understand what is meant by mass-nouns and count-nouns. Don't have to read through the entire thing, but that's an important concept, and chapter 6 will solve the problem. Also, you'll notice that at the end of each of the chapters, there are a number of suggested writing projects. You're welcome to take ideas from that. I prefer not to assign specific writing projects because I want you to write about something that you enjoy, and I don't know what it is. As I get to know you better, maybe I'll be able to make more intelligent suggestions there. But it should be enjoyable. I didn't imagine that anybody would find writing about the Civil War enjoyable, but I leave that entirely up to you.
No, it's just.
No, they're fascinating periods of history. There's no question about that. Okay, no, I'm just trying to touch all the bases here. As I mentioned before, theoretically, we should be getting about a project a week in. And so please get something together. You've seen what it looks like and what kind of suggestions you'll get as a result of handing it in. Sometimes it'll come back a little differently. In these cases, because this is the first submittal, I have simply said one project, each one counts as a project, and these are things to look at. In the future, I may well say things like, please go over this and incorporate the suggestions and resubmit, because it is good practice just to make sure that you understand what the concepts are that behind the suggestions. I haven't done a lot of suggestions about content as much as about style, just from the perspective of an editor, trying to make it make sense. And so one of the rules is, and we discussed that with Dawson's work, choose the right word. What is the right word? Well, for our purposes, the right word is the one that conveys as precisely as possible the meaning you want. And there may be an exact word for that. There may be a word that's so obscure that nobody knows it, but that's okay for our purposes. If you're writing something for a paper, you can assume that your reader is going to be versed in that particular subject and will use a dictionary if necessary. So let's make sure always to find the correct word if we can. The style, there are a number of different points there that I think need to be made just from the perspective of an editor. Avoiding repetition, if we can, avoiding simple, choppy sentences. If you see what I mean, if you are writing simply subject, verb, object in separate sentences, it ends up being choppy and it's not interesting to read. It looks like the work of a third grader, and it can be made much more interesting by combining things together in intelligent ways. The beginning of chapter, can I borrow your book for a second? Sorry. At the beginning of chapter 5, there's a section there in which, and I didn't really plan this initially, but part of the vocabulary story, one sentence of the vocabulary story, I took that sentence and said, you can take that sentence and break it down into 10 little sentences if you wanted to, and it would work fine. But it wouldn't read comfortably. It wouldn't read as though it's put together by someone who understood what he's doing. And so look at the different ways. And look at chapter 5 a little bit as well as chapter 6. Okay, let's bring things to a conclusion here. I always like to be able to run over, but apparently we can't because everybody's got other commitments to get to, and I'll try to incorporate all the things in here that we discussed today. Anybody have any questions? Okay, if you find other material, just as I'm looking around for it and putting it up there as I find it, oh, thank you. Please post it, and we'll incorporate that into the class as well. Okay. Look for good stuff.
Okay.
Okay. Let's bring things to an end here, and we'll see you all next week.